one day it kind of all came crashing down. I was driving to work, just kind of burst into tears. 5 days after my 18th birthday, I had a brand new Audi A3 on my driveway. I got flown to New York for a month, staying in the middle of Manhattan, business class travel, gold Amex, etc. But a few years in, I feel like I was kind of pushed on this path, and it wasn't who I was truly aligned to, and that I'd just become so far away from who I truly was that this was this kind of moment where I was kind of forced to make changes and look at things a little bit differently. And Alex Hormozi has this idea that these super successful people are very clinical about their environments. I think that it's very easy to let little comments that people make around you get in. As you start to become clearer about your goals, it becomes less about, how do I have fun at the weekend, and more about how do I achieve what I want to achieve.
Welcome to another episode of Big Risk Energy. And on this episode, I am blessed to be joined by the one and only Matt Swain. Matt is an international speaker. He builds brands for entrepreneurs and is an author. Matt, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
So Matt, we've already had an amazing conversation pre-podcast, and I'm super excited to speak to you about all the things we discussed. But let's start with the book. As Kobe, producer, said just before, it doesn't sound like the typical story of someone just saying, I'm done with a corporate career, I need to make a change. This sounded a lot more existential and a lot more meaningful. So talk us through what that meant to you.
Yeah, at 18, I kind of started off on a kind of corporate ladder path. I was following the kind of dream that everybody had sold me, get a big corporate fancy job, wear a nice suit, work in a nice glass office block in London. And so that's what I did. I started my career in a big four professional services firm. And to start with, it was great. 5 days after my 18th birthday, I had a brand new Audi A3 on my driveway. I got flown to New York for a month, staying in the middle of Manhattan, business class travel, gold Amex, etc. But a few years in, I feel like I was kind of pushed on this path, and it wasn't who I was truly aligned to. And so one day it kind of all came crashing down. I was driving to work and just kind of burst into tears, and that lasted for about 2 hours. Thankfully my grandma's house was very nearby, so kind of drove to her house and just kind of sat in her armchair just crying, and I didn't know what was wrong. This hadn't happened to me. I hadn't heard it kind of happen to anybody else, but it was this real moment of pain where I realized that I had been following this path that I probably shouldn't have, and that I'd just become so far away from who I truly was that this was this kind of moment where I was kind of forced to make changes and kind of look at things a little bit differently and make some changes.
Wow. And when this moment happened, breakdown of tears, did it feel like it was a culmination, it was heading to this, or was this out of nowhere, just bang?
Yeah, I kind of look back at that morning and there was nothing different. I woke up at the same time, I had my same morning routine, I shut the front door in the same way, got in the car, and everything felt so normal, and it really was this flick of a switch within me. But it was definitely it definitely had come from, that whole kind of lifestyle building up where I was getting further and further and further away, until it kind of shattered, in that moment, and you're left to kind of pick up the pieces of that kind of broken glass that's kind of, spread across the floor, metaphorically.
Okay, so as a young professional, young man at that time, where you have all the pressures that young men have in terms of earning and making money and all those things, at that moment, how difficult it is to say, well, I know I'm in the wrong shoes for myself right now, as it were, but I'm earning great money, I'm getting all these other things, getting the plaudits, I've got this trajectory to be making 10 times more money. That's a really difficult thing to say, I need to make a change despite the difficulties. Yeah,
no, it really is. And for me, that was actually the hardest and strangest part, where, kind of life after that kind of continues fairly normally. You kind of explain to people this situation and they don't really understand it. And there's so much resistance in trying to move away into this kind of new journey and this new path. And just no one understood. And it's for me, I had to really trust my deepest instincts. I had to go, okay, what do I want, and how do I block out the rest of the noise? And I think that this is something that's come up time and time again, where, especially with kind of socials and stuff, you have to block out that noise. You have to not listen to your mum when she's telling you to kind of, take the job or whatever, and really kind of focus inwards. And I feel like I've been on this real journey of kind of getting closer and closer to who I truly am, and focusing, more and more inwards on how I can become complete in and of myself, as opposed to looking into the external world for, validation, attention, money, success, accolades, whatever that could be.
So, okay, super interesting. So what does your process, and what did your process at that time look like for getting closer to the self? And how does this match up then with brand building in a reality where the version that is put forward on social media is probably quite the way that you described, success, pushing things forward, all that side of things? How do you marry the two?
Yeah, I think it's a tough question. I mean, I started around this kind of period posting about I got quite into reading, and I started kind of, having thoughts from my experiences and the books that I was reading that I started to then share online, and got quite into writing. And that was the kind of start of my kind of, this career in the branding, marketing, social media world. But I think that, it is hard to marry the two up. I have a little bit of a controversial view on authenticity, in the sense that I believe that your social profiles and your brand online should work for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I see a lot of people kind of post things that would move them further away from those core goals and outcomes that they're looking to achieve. So like, I do speaking, and, I'm looking to always kind of, look to kind of, build my portfolio of speaking, etc. Now, if I was to post about this time where I was late for work or something like that, it is going to off-put that decision maker who has got to make that decision on whether they hire me for the gig, where they're entrusting me with a huge responsibility of being there on time, speaking to 200 people, not getting nervous, not messing up, not swearing on stage, and, not having a breakdown on stage and whatever else. And so, I have to, I'm, careful. I'm strategically building my brand, and that's what we do with all of the entrepreneurs and the founders that we work with. And I find that too many people are almost trying to be too authentic, and they start to share sob stories and downplay their success and downplay their results in order to kind of please their peers and the algorithm. But as a result, they miss out on that end goal that they're looking to kind of strive towards.
Really, really interesting. Really interesting. So from a social perspective then, what do you think the impact is when... So you don't think one of the people you're brand building for needs to embody the brand? There can be like a gap between understanding this is an online brand and this is who the individual is, rather than the two being one and the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, and as you go on your journey in building a brand, I think that there are moments where you are more authentic, and you're kind of assessing, okay, well, when I shared this happens, whether that's more views, whether that's less opportunities or more opportunities. And so I think that you're almost kind of always kind of listening to the kind of response that you're getting. But I do think that there can be a separation between who you are and who you are online. And that, like I am me, and I am trying to be complete in and of myself. And my brand is just a tool that I have, which helps me to do more of what I want to do, more speaking, more stuff like this, more great conversations, meeting people that are like-minded. And so I'm very clear that I'm trying to build me complete and of myself. And then my brand is a tool that I have in my toolkit to open more doors.
Yeah, and that makes total sense to me. It genuinely does. Do you think the people consuming the content appreciate that there can be that difference between, Matt the individual and Matt the brand? Because I think actually from a creator perspective, that's a really useful way of thinking about it. Because I think as long as you're creating with the cognizance of, well, this is a brand, this is me, and the two don't always need to match up, then I think that makes sense. Where I think I see creators get into trouble from a mental health perspective is them almost believing the brand and the self are the same. And like you say, we don't put out the most controversial or vulnerable or weak parts of the self into the brand. And then you have this situation where people were like, well, I can't be vulnerable, I can't be weak in my own life because this person that people believe I am doesn't have any of those characteristics.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's lots of opportunities to be vulnerable outside of the brand building exercise. And like, I still, talk to people in depth about stuff, but I choose to do that in an offline capacity instead of an online capacity. I had a good thought there.
No, all good. I mean, do you think people consuming the content understand there's a difference?
Yeah, so I think like the problem that I see at the moment is that so much of content is just pure lies. You see it on LinkedIn all of the time about like, people getting like 20 leads a week, and it's like, no way are they getting 20 leads a week. They're not qualified, they're not booked calls. People are even counting kind of inbound connection requests as a lead now, and it's just got kind of crazy. You see people talking about the speaking gigs that they have supposedly done, but no images, no proof of them actually speaking, and this is just becoming a constant. And as I said, like before, like so much of life comes down to blocking out that noise and really focusing on your goals, your strategy, your brand, you and who you actually are as well to get to where you want. And I think that people run into troubles where they start believing too much of what they see. And that, if you actually had conversations with these people behind closed doors, you would see the truth, and the truth is just a million miles away. And so there is this element of appreciating that a brand is there to work for somebody, and that it does just have the best moments, and that's okay. But you need to be reflective of that. And I don't know whether it's kind of speaking to them behind closed doors or something like that. But I think that tuning out of the noise is becoming more and more important, and more people on socials through content are trying to convince you that they have this magic tool that's going to save your life, this $99 course, and you can't believe them. Like only you have the answers. Only you can, put in the work, sign the deals, get to where you want to be. And I think the more control you take of within yourself, the further you can get. And so I actually think for some people, like, spending more time in the real world and less time online would help them kind of, feel more focused and get them to where they want to be.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly well put. And I think for creators as well, again, where I see them get into trouble is when they start to believe their own hype, right? And it's like almost they start to remove themselves from the individual they are, and then they become the idea of themselves on social. But no one's perfect, right? This is the thing. No one's perfect. So trying to embody perfection is only going to lead to trouble in that way. So you're working with lots of really interesting CEOs and business owners and doing some incredible stuff. A question I have for you is, what trends do you see amongst these people? Like, what do you see in terms of like their success? What are the things that you would say, right, I can see some really interesting running trends that are consistent across these really successful people that I work with?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is this is self-belief. And I actually went back to my secondary school a few months ago, and I met with the headmaster, and I sat in his office. We had an hour-long chat, and I actually said that the most important thing I learned from the 5 years at my secondary school was self-belief, in the sense that for me, I had good grades at GCSE and A-level, and I found that I had this self-belief where if I put my mind to, the end result of, getting the A, and I did the work and I got the A, there was this real like momentum and this real like belief that I could then go and do whatever I wanted to do. And so when I was interviewing, I was 17, interviewing at big investment banks and big kind of professional services firms, big kind of names in the finance space. And I just had this belief that I could do it, this real unwavering sense that like it was going to work. And it must have been really weird for my parents and people around me, because like even with the exams, I would walk into an exam and go, I know I'm going to get an A in this. And I didn't have any doubts at all. And I think that that's why that's partly why it happened. You put yourself in this mindset where it's gonna happen. And so I think that a lot of founders and CEOs and kind of successful people have this real sense of self-belief within themselves, and they're not looking for, somebody else to tell them it's a good idea. They're not looking for a social media post to get a million views for them to know it's like, the right thing. It's this real like internal self-belief, and that's what I'm trying to develop more and more, because I think that as you go through life, society kind of starts to condition you, and you actually need to unlearn, and you have to get back to this like true true self-belief within yourself. And so that's part of what I'm trying to do at the minute.
Amazing, and totally agree with you. So what does that journey of reclaiming self-belief look like?
I think it's tough. It's tough to do. I mean, I had it. One example where I can see it kind of clearly is that I did this post with Gymshark, trying to capture Gymshark's attention last year, and it went kind of crazy viral, got 2 million views, and I ended up going to Gymshark HQ, met with Ben, etc. And I just had this belief that it would work, and I was taking these pictures with this giant shark in the gym. And was kind of putting together the post, and I was like, this is going to work. And then I post it. Within like 2 minutes, Noel Mack, who's the chief brand officer, replied and was like, yes, we'll make this happen. And the post just went crazy. As I said, got 2 million views and everything else. And I'm trying to get back into that mentality where you have this crazy idea, you have this bold thing you want to try and do, and you just start to believe it can happen. And it's why like visualization and things like that are great. And one of the other things that I'm trying to do is get more into the body. And so a lot of people spend time in their head, and they think that they can think their way out of problems, but actually you need to kind of feel your way out of problems. And so it's getting out the head into the body and starting to clear any kind of residual emotional kind of trauma in there, with positivity, and trying to release those emotions. And so that's a big part of what I'm trying to do today, is invest in the body just as much as you invest in the mind, which is where everybody, I think that over the last 5 years, we've shifted too much to the mind, and actually we've got to get back to the vessel, which helps us do everything.
Yeah. I think you're totally right on that, and was so guilty of that myself. I would say for many years I existed purely as a mind, right? And that's it. And the vessel was just for the mind, but not appreciating the mind-body connection at all, right? Didn't matter if I wasn't looking after myself, if I wasn't training, didn't matter because my mind was still working. And only once rediscovering the importance and getting into that flow are you able to hit real velocity in that way. And I'd go as far as to say soul as well.
Yeah, no, I like that.
I don't know if that's so for me, the mind body soul connection, right? I think it was first just mind, then mind body, and then rediscovering soul as well. I don't know, is that something that comes into your thinking?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as I got diagnosed as a celiac last November, and whilst the kind of diagnosis is fairly fine, it's not not threatening in any way. I spent 3 months in the run up to that diagnosis just completely exhausted. We're talking kind of sleeping 20 hours a day. I could barely kind of last 2 hours without needing to sleep.
Wow.
And I went through, doctors and hospitals, blood tests and more blood tests, and nobody could really find the answer because I wasn't showing all of the symptoms of a celiac, and, it just wasn't picked up. During that period of time, you start to kind of realize, okay, the body is everything. My mind was fine, but my body was just not there at all. And so, from that period of time, I've been through a lot of change, stopped drinking, kind of moved on from certain friends, changed things in the business, built new habits. And so I've really kind of can see that kind of body soul side a lot more now as a result of that.
So with the symptoms of celiac, was it just like one day suddenly you've just got these symptoms? Because for some reason I thought it was something you're born with, or so how did it actually come on?
Yeah, so it's meant to be like hereditary.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people now getting diagnosed with kind of allergies and things like that, which are supposedly more like environmental things, the food we're eating, the processed food we're eating and things like that. So for me, there's no history of it in the family. There are a lot of people that are undiagnosed as a celiac. So I think it's like only 1 in 100 celiacs are diagnosed. So a lot of people are living with that without kind of realizing. But yeah, it's also brought a lot more attention to my gut health as well, and how important the gut is to kind of live a healthy life, and how your gut's kind of connect. It's like your second brain.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of opened up this whole new world of energy healing, gut health, and just generally trying to work on the body and kind of be the most energized version that I can be.
Yeah, nice. So so you've got these symptoms out of nowhere, just suddenly 20 hours a day, just exhausted. I mean, that must have been scary at the time to just out of nowhere suddenly have these things. And was it like based off around like a lifestyle change that these started to come in, or was it just like one day suddenly I'm fucked, basically?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, it wasn't kind of sudden. It was over the course of maybe a couple of weeks.
Right.
And then you're like, okay, well, I was speaking to a friend and they were like, this doesn't sound normal. You should go check it out, because it's very easy to like self-diagnose with like, maybe I'm just tired. Maybe I need to get a bit more sleep. Maybe I'm a bit run down. Maybe I'm not enjoying what I'm doing. Maybe I'm burnt out. And there's so many other, like, your brain would play tricks on you, and you're kind of think you can also just think you're a bit lazy. People just thought that like I just couldn't be bothered, and it was really hard to explain. Like, I had this real brain fog. I couldn't sit there and focus, and so then I started going for kind of checks, and it gradually got worse and worse, and so I went for more and more checks until about kind of this was kind of end of August. By November, start of November, I got diagnosed. So it was a really, really tough period. And it's that moment where, like, supposedly you have a lot of success. I was doing really well, on LinkedIn. I was getting recognized out in the streets. Everybody's saying like, you're smashing it. I was doing events and just like trying to make it through, kind of drinking my way through the events a bit, just to kind of give myself the energy, which was doing more harm than good. And, but then you're kind of left to face the harsh reality that you've got no energy, that things are kind of slipping through your fingers. And it was just a hugely painful moment. And, that pain though led to lots of kind of changes, and those changes led to growth, which brings me to where I am today, where I feel more energized, better people around me than ever before, pushing myself in great ways. Like everything's improved. And, in the last 12 months, basically.
Wow, amazing. I mean, it's great to hear the growth and improvement there. That's what it's all about. And do you think the major change you made when you left that Big Four consultancy to start a new type of life, do you think that transition helped you at this point say, well, I can make a really big change again because I've already made big changes?
Yeah, I guess so. I feel like I didn't have a choice though. I was sat in my therapist's room, and you're sat with 4 blank white walls, and there's no escaping reality. You've got to face the situation that you're in, the kind of, the low that you're sat in. And my therapist used to say there's only one way out, and that is to move through the pain. You can't move around it. You can't go under it. You can't go over it. You've got to go through it. And it was this one kind of line that just kept ringing in my head, like, growth's on the other side, but I have to move through this pain. And so, I didn't think there was much choice, really. I was very much, almost like the time before, I was very much like forced. The pain happened in such a kind of small amount of time and was so strong, it kind of forced me to change. Whereas I think some people have, smaller things that go over a longer period of time, and it's quite easy for them to settle and not make that change, because there's not this kind of like cataclysmic moment where they've got to abandon their old life. And the way that I view it now is like, I had to destroy that old self of me, my self that didn't have my best interests at heart, that was getting distracted, that wasn't as healthy, that wasn't focused on my body. And out of that old self generated a new self, which is who I am today. And I think that, actually, in order to build a new self, you have to destroy that old self. That old self has to kind of shatter for you to pick up the pieces and rebuild them into what you want to build them into.
Yeah, really interesting. But I think actually, you should give yourself more credit, because I know you say it's not a choice, but there are plenty of people who go through incredibly traumatic experiences, very, very intense but brief moments of pain, and the mind is amazing in terms of what it can do, in terms of repression and boxing things off. And there's a lot of people who get in trouble because they don't actually go through the pain. And the mind figures out a way to repress, forget, whatever these things are. And, you know, some of the, because I'm, you know, really, really interested in you know, growth and therapy and psychology and all these things. And, you know, reading some studies, especially around like psychedelic assisted therapy, coming out of Northern Ireland, some of the, and, you know, Northern Ireland has had a real history of a lot of trauma and the troubles and lots of difficult things going there. People who had been living with these incredibly painful moments and boxing them away for 20 years, 25 years, going to therapy every week where therapists are not able to get a word out of them, you know, about these things. And then in a psychedelic assisted environment, flooding open with all these things that they've not been going through for the last 25 years. So I think, although it doesn't seem like a choice at times, I still think it's a very impressive thing to say, I'm going to deal with this and go through it straight on, rather than saying, well, I'll deal with this in 10 years. We'll just put it up in a box and it'll come out in some other way for then. So, you know, give yourself credit on that side.
Yeah, I think a lot of it was due to getting into the body. And it's like, as you kind of said, your brain can rationalize things. And, you know, my therapist used to ask me questions and was like, and I kept answering with, I think it's this, or I think it's because of this. And he used to say, no, don't think, feel. Like, what do you feel? And it's this really common thing that I'm now always asking myself when I make decisions is like, how do I feel, as opposed to like, what do I think is best? And, you know, we live in this world where like the mind rules us, and really it's trying to, you know, kind of let the body have its say as well. And so I found that to be like a super useful thing just to say to yourself, like, you know, stop thinking, stop feeling, basically. And as I said, move from the mind to the body, because the body usually has all the answers. And even with kind of stopping alcohol, my body just knew it was the right thing. And I'm not tempted at all by a drink now. And you hear these people, because a lot of people, when they want to stop drinking, they start to think in their heads, like, I want to stop drinking, but they've made the decision with their head and not their body. And for me, it was, my body knows it's better when I don't drink, and my mind can't say anything to rationalize the idea of drinking. And it's really hard to explain, but like, my body made the decision, not my head.
Yeah, no,
and because my body's made the decision, it's so easy, because your mind is just always playing tricks. It's like, how can you make more decisions with the body? Because, you know, you're going to stay true to those. And I think like when you make habits based on the body, it usually works out much better.
Interesting. Okay. And in terms of restricting the mind, let's say, what does that look like for you? For me, it's been, you know, meditation to stay on top of thoughts. But and I think it is it's difficult. I think the mind is an incredible tool, and I think from my perspective anyway, we shouldn't discount the mind when it comes to decision making. However, it's about calmness of mind. A busy mind with thoughts coming from a body that is not being looked after will destroy you. But when you can treat your body well and have a calm mind, then sometimes I find like, and especially in the creative, so I used to do stand-up, for example, and I think especially in creative, sometimes like things will come to you from the ether. Like thoughts will pop into your mind as if they haven't come from you, and you've got to run with those things. But it only happens in a calm mind. You know, mind which is full of negativity and all these things will not produce well. But I think when you can get yourself into optimum alignment in that way, the mind will give you some incredible gifts.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, I think the biggest one for me is like stopping drinking, and like the amount of clarity you get. And I actually think all of the benefits come, you know, people do it for a few weeks or dry January, but all the benefits actually start to come after kind of 2-3 months, and you just get so clear in your head. And the clearer your intentions, I find like the more you can connect to the kind of quantum field and bring energy forwards and bring opportunities forwards. And so that clarity is vital. It's really hard to get in today's world. As I said, you know, it's about blocking out that noise, developing that internal self-belief and robustness of who you are, in order to, you know, not keep needing drips from elsewhere. We're all kind of hooked up to these drips of, you know, Instagram likes, and, you know, even our like, someone in our family making nice comments, or like, you do something good and you want people to say nice things. It's like, how can you just like do the good thing? How can you just like, do the action, hit post without being attached to that drip in the same way.
Really interesting. So a couple questions for you. So meditation, is that part of calmness of mind? And also, how long have you not been drinking for, out of interest?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to do more meditation. I find like the visualization stuff where it's a little bit more active meditation, slightly more kind of interesting. I'm a big fan of Joe Dispenza, and kind of connecting to that quantum field, having that kind of elevated emotion, that clear intention, and kind of aligning up to that kind of future kind of path and that quantum field. So that's where part of the self-belief, I feel like I had this idea that self-belief was important, and I think Joe Dispenza has helped me quantify and put kind of science behind it. And I can't remember the second question.
How long have you not drunk for?
Oh, so yeah, I mean, so when I had the diagnosis, I stopped drinking. But I do occasionally have a drink if I am overseas, and where like the intention is to drink, and so I'm super clear on like the intention, like, will this experience be better if I have a drink? Because like, contrary to what a lot of people say, like, if you don't drink, like, going to events and whatever else is less fun. I'm not a believer that like, people can go on nights and like have more fun without drink.
Oh yeah. If you've been to a nightclub sober, you know that it's not a place where humans should exist sober.
Yeah, exactly. And I think actually one of the key benefits of not drinking is like, if you stop drinking and you still do all of the things that you did before, then actually there's been no real impact. Like, when you stop drinking, you should also be making changes, stop seeing, certain people who may be unaligned, spend your time in different ways. And so I don't even go to the pub or bars now. I can't go to them. But as I said, sometimes when I'm overseas, like, the intention is, with friends to kind of have fun, to go on a night out. And so I'm very okay with drinking in those scenarios. I think if you set too stricter rules on yourself, then that becomes the kind of new arch nemesis, as it were. And so it's all about intentions. What do I want to, what are my goals? What do I want to get out of the experience? And how can I best do that?
Yes, absolutely. Very, very dangerous to set such intense limitations, because then that becomes a reward. And if you have ADHD as well, reward equals dopamine. So the bigger the payoff, the more dopamine, the better the focus. It's a vicious, self-fulfilling cycle. But really interesting. And I want to ask, because you've mentioned it a couple times. So you've spoken about changing friend group or cutting people out. Why was that important? What brought that on? It sounds like it was around the diagnosis as well. How does it all look? And what does that, most importantly, what has that allowed you to do?
Yeah, I mean, Alex Hormozi has this kind of idea that these super successful people are very clinical about their environments. And I think that it's very easy to let like little comments that people make around you kind of get in, as it were. And, as you start on this kind of path of growth, you start to tolerate less and less. And so, like for me, like, sitting in a pub for 2 hours is just like something I almost won't tolerate. It's just something that I won't do. And so I think, as you start to go on this path of growth, as you start to become clearer about your goals, it becomes less about like, how do I have fun at the weekend, and more about how do I achieve what I want to achieve. And in order to do that, you have to make certain sacrifices, and certain things have to become more important. Certain things become less important. And I've just had this kind of this shift, this shift towards people that are more aligned to what I'm doing now. So like, instead of going to the pub, I'll do a gym session with someone, or we'll go and do a co-working thing, or we'll go for a hike. And so it's just, I play a lot of tennis. And so the people I play tennis with are actually the people I see the most. And so it's trying to find, kind of like-minded people that are aligned where you want to go. And so you can spend your time aligned to how you want to spend your time, and it's also aligned to how they spend their time as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. So it's not like necessarily a brutal, we're not friends anymore.
No.
It's more of a just following, your intuition about what's serving you, rather than calling people up being like, yeah, delete my number.
Yeah, no, nothing like that.
No, but it's good to know. It's good, because I think it's so important, right? Because I think when you do get guys like Alex Hormozi, who ultimately a lot of what he's saying is his personal brand, and there will be a gap between his reality and his brand as well. But when people do say things like that, especially in quite a, I think sometimes people interpret those messages a bit too brutalistically at times, and probably does lead people to being like, yeah, we're not friends anymore because you're not on the same path. And I think it's important to retain our humanity even through the growth, because ultimately everyone's on the right journey for themselves, or at least feels like they're on the right journey for themselves. And I think it's not a case of one being better than the other. And I'm not saying that that's what you're suggesting at all, but it's a case of saying, well, I'm just going to follow the right moves for me. But it's not about being harsh to people who maybe have a different level of ambition because it suits them, and often I think are happier as well.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know about you, but
I think a lot of success is driven from insecurity, and I think that people that live a quiet life, etc., usually have it better. But like, it's just like certain people have a certain thing in their mind, and that like seeking out discomfort just becomes a key factor of, that satisfaction somewhere in the mind. And, like, a lot of people talk about imposter syndrome being this bad, negative thing that you want to try and get rid of. Whereas for me, I see it as something to embrace. If I'm feeling scared and uncomfortable, it usually means that I'm making the right decisions and pushing myself, which I know is aligned to me and my goals and the way that my brain works. And so, I'm trying to, I feel like for me, it's actually like, how do I lean more into imposter syndrome as opposed to trying to escape it? And I think that that's where a lot of this advice goes wrong, because people go, oh, I shouldn't feel anxious, or I shouldn't feel this, or I shouldn't feel that. It's actually just being accepting of it and then just like moving forwards regardless. I think, people want to control what they're feeling too much, and you just want to like feel what you feel and kind of move on and not let it rule you, not let it kind of take over your life, basically.
100%. I can imagine being so narcissistic that you don't have imposter syndrome. Being like, yeah, no, I deserve everything. I am this great, right? I couldn't agree more. I think it's terrifying, people who don't have imposter syndrome. So I think that's a really good point. So talking about the self and the scripts that we tell ourselves, and totally think you're right that people who drive for a certain level of success is ultimately coming down to a feeling of some type of insecurity. So with all the healing, the working through trauma, all of those things, losing that insecurity, does that mean you lose the drive for success? Because actually it's like, well, actually I'm good. I'm happy with I'm happy with my lot. And I think it's something which a lot of people on journeys of growth, and I see this in creative industries, I see this in corporate industries, people who are trying to push to that next level, there is that held fear about, if I heal, if I can accept, do I then lose the drive?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a tough question. So I actually was recording with Steven Bartlett and Liam Payne, and when he was on the podcast, and I can remember having this conversation afterwards, which was sparked from him being on the podcast, around like, do you become complete in and of yourself and then go and have the power to do what you want to, or do you kind of do you get the, or do you get one sec, let me just
no you go for it.
Chase the, or do you chase the success and then that makes you complete and happy? Like, which comes first? And I think that a lot of people, there's some amount of kind of chasing required, some amount of insecurity driving things, but I think you then want to shift to this point where you become complete in and of yourself, and that actually the people that go on to achieve the most, they've kind of fed the insecurity, they've resolved it, and now they're just able to get all of this, move forwards and kind of achieve all of this stuff without that kind of feeling. And so like I've probably said like the words complete of your become complete in and of yourself a lot, but I think it's now like so key for me that like I feel like I've had insecurities, I've had them satisfied, as it were, and now I want to be like a really strong vessel, a really strong ship, kind of sailing, and kind of moving forwards. And I think the happier you can become in and of yourself, the easier it becomes, because you tie less and less of your self to these outside things. And it's like, if you can become really, really strong in and of yourself, then the outside world has very little to offer you. And that allows you to kind of move through, with way less emotion and everything else.
It's interesting. I think you are totally right. But I also think, being hyper realistic, if LinkedIn went down tomorrow, right, we're in trouble, and it's like, as much as we want to not rely on that side of things, like there is, and as strong as we can become in and of ourselves, we live in a society now which is totally codependent on the other and codependent on media and acquisition channels and all of these things in order for us to have, some level of success, right? And this is a comment on just the reality of where the world is in 2023. But and I think, so many points you make are really, really correct. And I think over hundreds of thousands of years, animals and humans have evolved. And when we think about the body and listening to the body, we're listening to all this hard-coded information, this hard-coded gearing towards pursuit. That pursuit of hunting, gathering, pursuit of food, of safety, of all these things. And it's and oftentimes I think maybe happiness only can come from pursuit, because that's when we remove the thoughts of the mind and what 2023 should be. Actually, we're hard-coded to continue to drive forward, to gather more.
Yeah, no, I believe that like progress is the most motivating force in the world, and you'll see that like when you have the momentum and you're kind of making the progress, like everything feels so good. There are elements of like, how can you still like do the actions required to get the progress even when things are not so good, and it's a down month, or the views aren't there, or the gigs aren't coming in, etc. But progress is so important, and I think that a lot of people kind of shy away from it, but I think that a lot of my satisfaction comes from progress in what I'm doing. And I always kind of look, where it's nice to look back at the last year and just see that progress. That's super satisfying. That is motivating. And I just always want more and more of the kind of progress to come. Even if it's small progress, it still has that kind of motivational aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find one of the most valuable things that I do is I've got a to-do list that I've kept every single day since June 2015. And sometimes being able to just look back 2 years, being like, where was I on December the 18th, 2016, whatever it is. It's so nice to be able to see that progress. And absolutely, it's things like that, and being able to actually almost like tap back into how I felt at that moment in time and being like, well, this feels great in comparison to that, is so motivating to continue to drive forward.
Yeah, I think, this word kind of change is viewed very negatively, and it's a good thing. And it's like the same with feeling imposter syndrome is good. I think like having change is also good. And so, yeah, I think I'm the same with like risk. That a lot of people shy away from taking risks, and they view risk as this bad word that they need to mitigate against and stay away from. But I'm like, the bigger the risk, the bigger the rewards. And actually, most things aren't that risky. Most things can't go that wrong. And so, I think again, like I'm trying to always go, how can I lean into risk more, take bigger risks, as opposed to shying away from them. And so I think, certain words in culture are viewed kind of badly upon, and actually those words are going to be a driving force to a more meaningful life.
Yes, 100%. I think that's totally right. Risk, whenever I'm thinking about risk, I'm like, if this goes wrong, do I end up in jail? No. Okay, well then let's take this risk, right? Because I think unless it's something that existential, then it's probably something worth doing. Because I was just been in Miami for the last couple of weeks, and when we talk about taking bets, taking risks, I mean, in the US, that's how they do it, right? They take big bets, knowing they're not all going to pay off. But if you take 6 big bets and 1 pays off, the progress you make because it was a big bet, because it was a big risk, is so much greater than doing 100 small risks. So I think it's so important. When I look back where I was at 17 years old, in a really bad way, I was sleeping in my car at times, like just in a really, really bad way. The only way I've been able to get to where I am now at 32, 15 years down the line is risking everything, dropping out my masters, right, to start or to actually take my business more seriously. All of these things, 100%, it's got to be about big bets.
Yeah.
So on that note, what's the single biggest risk you've ever taken, and what was the outcome?
I mean, I think there's a couple, but like leaving the corporate world was definitely one. You know, just at the time, like just people thought I was just crazy. And I've got this kind of passage in my book where, you know, I kind of talk about just how crazy the world thought I was, and how much, like, you know, kind of, I don't know if resentment's too strong, but like there's so much kind of like, just why are you wasting this opportunity? You know, at the time I was 22, you know, I had this great career path ahead of me, and I was going to leave it to go and work for some entrepreneurs in the kind of branding space. But yeah, it's the best decision that I've made looking back. And yeah, I'm so happy I took that risk. And it's like, when you have, again, like the self-belief, when you take the risks and you kind of see it pay off, maybe not immediately, but like in the end, you're then just encouraged to take bigger and bigger risks, and you believe in yourself more and more and more as time goes on.
Nice. And how long after exiting the corporate world did you feel validated in that decision?
I don't know. I think I just knew it was the right decision for me. So I think really straight away, as I said, like I tried really hard to block out that outside noise. And so it felt right to me, and that was the most important. And even everything that I do now, it always feels right to me. I feel like I'm quite aligned and tuned into, you know, what I care about, and, you know, where I want to go. And I feel like I'm quite good at making decisions that align up to that now. So yeah, I think I'd had so much of the resistance before. I was also kind of used to it. You know, I was used to people doubting me and saying I made the wrong choice, and I kind of just got over it. I was more like, I'm just gonna do it.
Love
Who cares?
that. Yeah, I love that. Nice. Okay, cool. Right, my next question for you is, what are you proudest of?
It sounds really weird, because I'm not, you know, a big kind of like believer of like the traditional education system, but I think I'm probably proudest of my like kind of like GCSE and A-level grades, because, you know, I was always like very much like middle of the class. I wanted to take graphic design at GCSE, and I can remember like parents' evening in year 9 before that decision, where my graphics design teacher was like, I'm not sure if, you know, Matt can take graphic design. I'm not sure if he's, you know, dedicated enough and sensible enough. I ended up getting full marks in my graphics work, and I feel like, you know, I feel like it was the first moment where I was able to prove what I was able to achieve. You know, it's just the exam paper, and it's all that self-belief and the hard work, and it's the first time I saw it pay off when I got those grades. And that's just been a key kind of reminder and self-belief tool for me going forwards. And so I feel like, you know, those grades were quite impactful to me and my mindset. You know, the grades like less so in what it kind of meant, but more so the belief that it gave me and what was possible. And I was able to then go through, you know, the next few years just believing in what I could accomplish. So yeah, I'd say that.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It's starting to build up that proof of ability, right? And it's something which you can point to even at the early stage, be like, yes, I'm capable. Yeah. Right. And then just helps you get that momentum, as you're describing before, to unlock the next milestones, and then that stack of proof gets bigger.
But it's less of a stack of proof to prove to other people. Like most people see grades, it was a stack of proof for myself, and that was the real benefit. Like, it didn't really matter. You know, those grades have not really impacted my life, but they've impacted me and who I am, and the way that I look at myself, especially early on, which has led to a lot of other things. So yeah, it's like how, and I think that, again, like, how can you do things in life that give you that proof for yourself, where actually you're not trying to get validation from anybody else, or not trying to get the grades to get this, to get that. How can you just do things that are complete in and of themselves? And yeah, kind of like that, basically.
Yeah, nice. All right, cool. My next question for you is, what does it take to be successful? I know you're going to say self-belief, but what beyond that, if anything, does it take to be successful?
So I can't say self-belief.
You can say self-belief, but there's got to be more than that. Or is it as simple as that? Self-belief is the only requirement for success.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between like self-belief and like true self-belief. You know, like, it's like a lot of people have self-belief but caveats. It's like, I think I can do it, but like, I'm a little bit scared, or like I'm a little bit, it's like unwavering self-belief. And that's what I'm working hard on. I feel like, yeah, sure, I like I want to do speak to like a 500 person audience next year, and it's like, sure, like I think it's possible. I can see it all working, but I'm not quite there at like believing it's gonna happen. I'm not quite connecting to that vision in the kind of quantum field, as it were, and so I think it's that really true self-belief where it's like I had back when I was like, I'm gonna walk into this exam and I'm gonna get the A, and nobody's can tell me otherwise. And people may think I'm crazy. People may think that like like I don't know the word beginning with A, where it's like
Apathetic.
like people may think I'm arrogant, but like I just knew, and I wasn't trying to please anybody else. I just knew myself. Like I wasn't kind of boasting about it. I just, in my head, I just knew that I would get the A, and I want to get back to that level. Basically, that's what I'm looking to do. Where I can go, I know I'm going to be able to speak in front of a 500 person audience, and I can just say that to myself and just know it's going to work out.
It's interesting. The self-belief and goal setting thing is really interesting as well. So you know Rick Rubin, producer, has produced like every single artist from Kanye West through to the Beastie Boys through to Red Hot Chili Peppers. Like he is the producer. You recognize him if you saw a picture of him. And he said something recently which I found very interesting, which was actually goal setting means putting limitations on yourself. True self-belief is going beyond and transcending goals, because actually if we set a goal to speak in front of 500 people, then we're denying ourselves the intention and awareness of speaking in front of 5,000 next year. So I thought it was a really, really interesting one, which is like the idea of setting goals points you at achieving a certain aim. So if we have true self-belief, we shouldn't be limiting ourselves in that way. And I think, so we've got something called the reticular activating system, which is the system that operates between the eyes and the subconscious. So when we put messages into our subconscious, our eyes are then looking out for these things. And it doesn't happen on a conscious level, right? It's all background processing. So if we were to set goals which are actually maybe somewhat restrictive, are we stopping this, awareness machine from driving us to bigger things? So I think it's a really interesting one. And because I've always been goal setting as well. And I think this year will be the year of just not setting goals, but going down true self-belief in that way.
Yeah, I think it's about like, connecting to that vision. And like I'm really against like affirmations and manifestation and all of that kind of things. But I am really big on like Joe Dispenza's kind of philosophy of a really clear intention with an elevated emotion can get you to where you kind of want to be. And so yeah, I'm also trying to tap into that kind of bigger sphere of things and playing in this kind of I don't know, it to people that kind of it can kind of be a confusing thing when you're talking about like the quantum field and bringing opportunities forwards and like the self-belief and vision stuff. But I think when you're in it and you can kind of really feel it, it kind of makes sense. And you start to see it working, and then you just want to do more and more of it, basically. And so I think this connecting to the vision is something that like once you see, you want to do more of it.
Yeah, 100%. And it's interesting because for me, the manifestation thing is not, I don't have a vision board, right? I never read The Secret. It's actually intention and awareness. That's exactly what it is for me. Is it's just having clear intention on what you want to achieve, but then the awareness to see that these things exist in the content of consciousness more often than we think. It's our busyness of mind that stops us from being able to capitalize on those things and really take those opportunities. So because I think manifestation is probably so poorly defined and ranging all the way from really, really far out, very, very pseudo stuff, all the way through to just potentially intention and awareness. Okay, my next question for you is there anything you wish you did differently?
So like at the time, I think that some of those like painful moments you think, oh, maybe I should have picked a different path. Like for me, I joined this professional services firm at 18. Maybe I should have gone to uni normally, whatever else. But then I look at where I am today and I'm like, all of those past experiences have led me to where I am today. And actually like some of those painful moments that I've been through have been really important and supercharged my own like personal growth and have kind of opened these opportunities. Like I needed those experiences, like they're there for a reason. And at the time it feels like life's unfair and all of this stuff, but within, you know, a period of time, you start to kind of look back and appreciate that they're there to as a lesson to learn. And I think like the more lessons you can learn, you know, the better life gets, basically, because you see reality more clearly. And so like in hindsight, yes, but like in looking back now, like no, I would have everything the way that it's been.
Yeah, love that. Love that. All right, my last one for you today is 15-year-old Matt walks in the room right now. What are you going to tell him?
So like I always think like that version of me is just so different to who I am today. Even the version of me last year is very, very different. And so I would say like everything that I know that I knew back then is going to change. I'm going to change. Like everything's going to be changed, and that's okay. Like almost the fact that you can, you know, like the beliefs that you have, like everything can change, and that's a good thing. Like I think like back then I was like, I want to get to be a Big Four partner. I want to like, you know, make £1 million a year, like all of this kind of stuff. I want the Ferrari, and that's all changed. And so yeah, I would just tell him that like things can change, and that's okay.
I love that. Matt, you're a legend. Where can people find you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on all the kind of platforms like Instagram at @MattSwain_ and LinkedIn are my main platforms. So yeah, go check them out.
Nice one. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Amazing. Thank you for having me. It's a great convo.
Thanks for watching the episode. And if you haven't subscribed, please hit subscribe below so that you can support the podcast and we can keep on bringing you amazing new guests. If you want to see the other amazing episodes in this podcast, click into our series section. As ever, if there are any other guests or topics you want us to explore, just let me know in the comments and we'll do our best to bring someone in.